How money works. Generic picture, 1.7 million subs. Okay, it's either a standard, decent explainer channel or it is AI slop.
The amount of money spent on lobbying hit a record $5.24 billion at the federal level alone. And well, I don't know if you realized, but there weren't even any major federal elections in 2025.
Damn.
When you factor in the upcoming midterms, state and local level lobbying, in addition to all of the money spent outside of officially disclosed channels, the volume of cash that is, enabling the lawmaking process is going to eclipse 11 figures within America alone this year. And by all accounts, it's going to be a great investment. A Cambridge University report found that out of 1,779 policy issues passed during their study, the preferences of economic elites and special business interests had a significant influence on policy outcomes, which wasn't really the shocking part. The shocking part was that the preferences of average citizens had effectively no measurable influence, even in large groups that were extremely politically active.
Okay, I'm good. This Gillen's and Page study is people have gone back and forth on this a lot. That interpretation is incredibly dramatic and not really true. But there's like a billion other videos and stuff on these on this research. To be citing this research this recently, and then that's your takeaway from it, means you're retarded. I'm good. Ooh. Cat in the Hat.
Of course.
What?
What up, niggas?
What? React to that video. A-Truck reacts to a lot of his stuff. It's just that's just slopulous trash. Why? No, because I'm gonna have to be. I need to pay attention more if I'm gonna do this.
Last year, the amount of money spent on
I think the takeaway from that Gillen's and Page study was that like the elites and the average people get their beliefs like in policy like about 50-50, like it's split 50-50. And then I think when there's a disagreement, I think it tends to go a little bit more towards the population, I think. I don't remember. But it's nowhere near as dramatic as this guy made that sound.
Lobbying hit a record $5.24 billion at the federal level alone. And well, I don't know if you realized, but there weren't even any major federal elections in 2025. When you factor in the upcoming midterms, state and local level lobbying, in addition to all of the money spent outside of officially disclosed channels, the volume of cash that is, enabling the lawmaking process is going to eclipse 11 figures within America alone this year. And by all accounts, it's going to be a great investment. A Cambridge University report found that out of 1,779 policy issues passed during their study, the preferences of economic elites and
I also don't like calling that a report. Sounds weird. I don't know why I don't like that word report instead of study. Unless this is like a different thing that Gillen's and Page published, but I don't think it is.
Special business interests had a significant influence on policy outcomes, which wasn't really the shocking part. The shocking part was that the preferences of average citizens had effectively no measurable influence, even in large groups that were extremely politically active. And this study was done in 2014, when total political spending was less than a quarter of what it is today. Part of the reason why that spending has become so ludicrous is not because the money is being used to circumvent the will of the people. That battle was won long ago. It's instead becoming a spending battle between other lobbyists to see whose special interest takes precedence over the lesser donors. Now, I know the problem of political lobbying is not exactly a surprise to anybody anymore. Even here on this channel, whenever we cover broken business models, from private equity, private credit, corporate farming subsidies, the gambling epidemic, data center subsidies, corporate consolidation, healthcare, the housing market, how you fund a retirement, and all the way down to something as mundane as how we collect economic data, political lobbying is, at least part of, the reason why things have become so clearly messed up. But I promise you,
Can you explain the lobbying thing? I get that politicians need to get industry knowledge, but why is the money part needed? You know what? Fucking good question. Is there a video on that? What do lobbyists spend their money on? When somebody says you spent some money on lobbying. Oh, how money works. Nice. how does lobbying really work? He's above the noise, so he should be able to tell us, right? Legal corruption?
Hey, you want to make a lot of money?
You know
Become
what?
a lobbyist. What up, world? Miles Best here, journalist, host, and someone who could use a little extra cash. Now, you've all heard about lobbyists, right? They get paid to schmooze with congressmen. Congressman, I know you want to pass this bill, man. Do you want a shrimpy? Y'all have a shrimpy? Yeah, you gotta pass that bill, though. Huh? Oh, yeah, totally. That sounds like a great idea, actually. Yeah, that's right, Congressman. Pass that bill. Enjoy that shrimpy. Cheers. So maybe it's not exactly like that, but lobbying is a $3.7 billion industry, and your average lobbyist is taking home $112K a year. It's not too shabby. Now, my gut is telling me that all this money changing hands is a little fishy. What's that gut? Yeah, I hear you. And I'm gonna get to the bottom of this, just for you. So today we're asking, what the heck do lobbyists do, and are they really that bad? Okay. So long story short, lobbyists are just people who talk to politicians to try to get them to pass or oppose laws and other policies. Professional lobbyists do that on behalf of their clients. And those clients can range from big corporations, trade associations, unions, nonprofits. It's literally a lobbyist's job to influence government officials to get them to adopt policies that are favorable to their clients. And there are thousands of different groups that either have lobbyists working directly for them or hire lobbyists from big lobbying firms. Even reptiles have lobbyists. That's a true story. The U.S. Association for Reptile Keepers has spent $10,000 on lobbying so far in 2022. Now, the term goes way back to when people would literally wait in the lobbies of government offices to try to catch lawmakers' ears. At its core, it's a way for citizens to petition the government for a redress of grievances, which is a right that's protected by the First Amendment. Okay, so that's what lobbyists are, but are they bad? So
Is it really just the money? Maybe it is just the money paid to people who do the lobbying, I guess. I don't know. I don't know why I would have thought it would have been anything different.
a lot of the critiques of lobbying come down to how money is involved in the process. It's totally legal for lobbyists to throw big fundraisers for politicians, and they themselves can actually personally donate to campaigns. It's insanely expensive to run for office. I mean, campaign spending for the 2022 midterm election cycle is projected to exceed $9.3 billion. That's like buying a quarter of Twitter. As Political reports, Representative Virginia Fox from North Carolina hosts a brunch bunch, which costs $1,000 to go to 1, $2,500 to go to 3, and $5,000 to go to 7. Seems like a sweet deal. Politicians raise money for their campaigns, and lobbyists get to build relationships with lawmakers. A win-win for lobbyists and politicians. And all this brings up some serious equity issues when it comes to who can afford to hire lobbyists, and ultimately, whose voice gets to influence government policy. Let me tell you a quick story. Once upon a time, polls showed that 80 to 90% of Americans favored allowing the federal government to negotiate with pharmaceutical companies for lower drug prices. I mean, the only thing that's more popular is The Rock. So, lucky for Americans, Congress was debating a bill, which would do just that. Easy win, right? It didn't pass. It died on the Senate floor. Pharmaceutical companies spent big money lobbying Congress to fight this bill. I bet y'all didn't see that coming, huh? So I looked up who the biggest spenders on lobbying were in 2021. Literally at the top, big business, as in the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, a pro-business interest group. Next up, landowners. Coming in at number 2 is the National Association of Realtors, an organization who, according to its website, has 114 years of advocating and protecting the rights of property buyers and sellers in the U.S. and around the world. Number 3, Big Pharma, the Pharmaceutical Research and Manufacturers of America. Also at the top of the list are big tech companies. Meta, the company formerly known as Facebook, and Amazon both spent over $19 million on lobbying. Who don't you see at the top? Lobbyists advocating for the people or the planet rather than a business's bottom line. Though, I will point out that AARP spent over $13 million lobbying in 2021. Dang.
Okay, all right. The only thing I don't like about when people say, like, most Americans wanted the government to be able to negotiate with pharmaceutical companies to lower drug prices. Depending on how you pull an issue, some people can pull really high on stuff, but when you get into the nitty-gritty of, like, how does this actually work, people start to have big disagreements. I feel like the biggest example of this obviously was Brexit, right? Where there was a big vote on Brexit, and it was just an overall, it was like a vibe vote, but somehow it ended up in a referendum. And then people were like 51%, you know what, I'm kind of vibing this out. But then the huge disaster was like, okay, well, how the fuck should this actually look? And then it's like, had there been a more granular conversation about Brexit, it probably wouldn't have passed, would be my guess. Was it 52%? Sorry. People do this a lot with a thing. They'll be like, oh, like, you know, should the United States government do something about climate change? And like 90% of people are like, yeah, of course. I mean, it sounds like it, right? I mean, we probably should. But then it's like, okay, well, here's what we can do. And it's like, okay, well, hold on. All these things cost me some money. Fuck that. Then support drops quite a bit. Not to say that lobbyists never get something over the American people or that the American people's opinions are perfectly expressed in Congress or blah, blah, just, you know.
However bad you think it's gotten, it's worse. We tend to think that money in politics begins and ends with how much our elected officials can pump into silly campaign ads and how many lobbyists an industry group can pay to stock the halls of the Capitol. But even if we were to somehow reform this in its entirety tomorrow, we only need to look to other countries to see it's probably not going to fix all of our problems. Oh, and of course, this is all assuming that everybody was actually playing by those rules in the first place.
I don't trust anybody that uses this fucking stock music.
Probably not going to fix all of our problems. Oh, and of course, this is all assuming that everybody was actually playing by those rules in the first place.
But when it comes to money in politics, which groups give the most?
In 2025, OpenAI and Anthropic, valued at $830 billion and $380 billion respectively, escalated their federal lobbying efforts.
Hospitals, insurers, doctors, unions, and pharmaceutical companies spent a record $19 million lobbying Beacon Hill lawmakers last year.
National Association of Realtors at $54 million.
Lobbying Beacon Hill lawmakers. Pharmaceutical companies spent a record $19 million lobbying Beacon Hill lawmakers last year.
National Association of Realtors at $54 million. The Business Roundtable at $27.
The American political system is broken. It is corrupt. It is significantly owned by the billionaire class.
What? Okay, so there's a lot of money going into American politics. I know, that alone isn't surprising. But the headline spending numbers, adding up to a mere $10 billion and change, are really just the basic prices. The actual bill is a lot bigger, and most of it never shows up on the receipt of public disclosure. To see this, we should start with the most obvious sources of money in finance, and then work our way down to the most discreet. So yeah, kicking off with direct campaign contributions. Most people think that money in politics is only writing big checks to politicians so they can fund their increasingly expensive political campaigns. Now, elections have absolutely become more expensive. Advertising directed by staffers is almost unavoidable at this point, and presidential candidates in particular are increasingly flying private and running huge teams to manage longer and more grandiose campaigns. But despite what it may look like, there are actually pretty strict limits on how much any individual person can give to these candidates. Currently, the Federal Election Commission cap on contributions to any federal level elected official, including the president, is $3,500 per election. So the primary and the general election, meaning the absolute most a single person can give to a candidate in one election cycle, is $7,000. The rules on this are strict and they are actually enforced. Additionally, individual contributors have to be real natural people. So if you are thinking you could just route your contributions through 1,000 shell companies, congratulations, you are starting to think like a political lobbyist. But in this particular case, natural are actually enforced. Additionally, individual contributors have to be real natural people. So if you are thinking you could just route your contributions through 1,000 shell companies, congratulations, you are starting to think like a political lobbyist. But in this particular case, that is not allowed. Now, $7,000 from an individual is a lot of money for most people, but in the grand scheme of most election campaigns, it is really just a drop in the bucket, and is unlikely to be enough on its own to sway any policy at this level. You may occasionally hear the phrase, "I can't believe how little Congress people will sell themselves out for," when news breaks that a couple paid $10,000 to a campaign and it looks like they got tailored legislative treatment. In reality, that is normally just what is being disclosed through official campaign contributions, and there is normally a lot more money involved behind the scenes. Direct contributions to a single campaign are just the most obvious, most regulated, most reported, and arguably least problematic way that money gets into politics. Most people cannot write $3,500 checks every election cycle, but enough people do make contributions that it is very difficult for any single wealthy donor to stand out based on their direct spending alone. Now, the one exception to the FEC cap is that candidates can put as much of their own money as they want into their own campaign, and significantly wealthy figures from both sides of the aisle like Michael Bloomberg and Donald Trump have both campaigned on their ability to do this. Bloomberg put roughly $936 million of his own money into his unsuccessful 2020 presidential campaign, which lasted about 100 days, making it by far the most expensive per-day campaign in American history. Trump contributed over $56 million into his own 2016 campaign and made it a big point that this would separate him from other politicians who need to keep their donors happy. Though, according to public disclosures, he didn't contribute any of his own money in 2020 or 2024. Now, get used to hearing this, but even through direct contributions, there are still some loopholes. Individual contribution limits are $7,000, but there is a very popular workaround called a joint fundraising committee. Not to be confused with my fellow broke dorm room friends back in college who went by the same name. These allow a single donor to write one enormous check that gets split across a candidate, a national party, and multiple state parties all at once, filling up the limits across all of these categories in a single transaction. In the 2024 cycle, a single donor could legally contribute over $800,000 through one of these arrangements. It's not great, but this alone is far from the biggest reason why money in politics has gotten so out of control. The $7,000 cap only applies to direct contributions, and even with a multiple six-figure workaround, this money pales in comparison to what is now being contributed very openly by wealthy individuals through super PACs, which have no cap at all. Now, PACs, or political action committees, are organizations that can support a specific interest like a political campaign, and were really just meant as a way for supporters to organize and make their voices collectively heard. Regular PACs also have limits on how much they are allowed to spend. Super PACs are technically distinct from regular PACs. Legally, they aren't actually technically PACs at all. Instead, they are officially classified as independent expenditure-only committees, which might sound like nerdy legal technicalities, but it means that they can take in unlimited amounts of money and spend unlimited amounts of money on any issue they see fit, including the election of individuals or the passing of specific laws. This freedom to spend all they want comes on the one specific condition that they do not directly coordinate with the political campaign that they are supporting. And even this lowest of bars gets pretty openly ignored. These were the groups that were enabled by the Citizens United ruling in 2010, which established that political spending is protected free speech under the First Amendment. The idea is that people with specific political concerns should be allowed to use their free speech to push a political agenda, and spending is...
One thing that's been really hard to communicate, I've noticed this is like a hurdle for people, and hopefully it's not just like an IQ check, but it's this concept of like a lower level idea being used to protect like a higher level thing. So like the reason why we have this like lower level freedom of speech is because we want to have a higher level freedom of speech, right? We want to be able to say things without fear of persecution from the government, so that we feel like that, like in the lowercase level, so that we can feel like broadly we have ideas that can come from any part of society and spread through society freely without the government being able to dictate what those ideas are. But like, there's a big problem when you start to have trouble tying the smaller concept to the larger concept. People seem to not care if that larger concept is getting lost, and they still defend the lower concept. I feel like most of it is done in bad faith. But it's a very frustrating thing. This is all the First Amendment arguments we've been having lately, where people are like, oh, free speech, free speech, free speech. And it's like, is it really free speech if everybody's just fucking lying about everything and nobody knows what's true or false anymore, and everybody's just getting mind fucked by social media? Like, I don't know if that's like the freest speech. Yeah, it's I don't know how to get people to like understand the larger concept sometimes. Same thing. This also comes up a lot with like the snarker communities, where people are like, show me that guy doxing. Did that guy dox somebody? It's like, well, no, not him, but like he's part of a community, and all of these people together kind of like enable the thing to happen. Man, I don't know. It's annoying.
Concerns should be allowed to use their free speech to push a political agenda, and spending is part of that free speech. But to avoid it becoming just an end-around campaign finance limits, there should be no direct coordination with the campaign itself. This is broken pretty regularly, and to nobody's surprise, pretty flagrantly too. Elon Musk donated roughly $239 million to America PAC in 2024 to support Donald Trump's presidential campaign, making it one of the largest super PAC operations in history. And the no cooperation rule was, well, the FEC actually issued a ruling that allowed super PACs to coordinate directly with campaigns on door-to-door canvassing operations, which America PAC immediately took advantage of. The campaign's own political director
I don't know if this is like a quote from the article or his summary of it. I don't know why a super PAC would ever be allowed to campaign alongside an ordinary PAC for ground operations or door-to-door canvassing things for like get out the vote stuff. That seems like it would never be okay, but that's not good.
which America PAC immediately took advantage of. The campaign's own
The real problem is that campaign finance regulations are unprincipled and very arbitrary, which makes the whole system weird and difficult to justify. Close. The real problem is it is inconceivable to an American mind that you could ever judge a thing that is supposed to be speech. It is inconceivable to an American mind that there can ever be like a fact of the matter about anything. And that's one of the reasons why Citizens United is the most like harmonious thing when it comes to our Constitution and our laws in this country. Like, the question with Citizens United is like, should you be able to donate and have political speech or whatever around election cycles? It's like, sure, as long as you're not directly supporting like a particular candidate, you know, like that's fine. And like the actual adult answer should be, we could probably tell when you're like directly supporting a candidate, but like to the average American, so hold on, get ready, hold on, guys, get ready for this one. Time to ask the killer question. Who's going to decide? Who's going to decide when you're breaking the rules then? Who's going to be the one to decide when you're actually... And that question is the thought-terminating question that literally cripples and destroys every possible step in the direction you could take towards regulating anything in the political finance environment. You just can't. Oh, so the government's going to tell us when somebody's breaking the rule on it? The government's going to tell us when you're lying? The government... Like there's no fact of the matter about any particular thing ever, and it's just mind-rotting. It's actually mind-rotting for Americans.
Political director publicly credited Musk's operation with conserving campaign funds by outsourcing field operations to the super PAC, which allowed Trump's campaign to redirect money into ad spending. Now, spending money on ads alone is obviously a big deal that can move elections. Even here on YouTube, the amount of money we make on the platform before major federal elections increases significantly because of how much is being spent on endless campaign ads. But these messages don't actually require that much coordination. The formula for political ads isn't exactly that hard to reverse engineer. Say bad things about the other guy and nice things about your guy. Which means in this space, most super PACs find it a lot easier to keep their legally mandated safe distance. But it's also not the only place where they spend their money.
But also, what average American is defending Citizens United? It's usually the brain-dead opinion in the opposite. No, I think the average American will defend Citizens United when their particular issues come into play. It's just that nobody ever really knows how it plays out. When people think of Citizens United, they think, oh, Elon Musk just donated $20 trillion for ad spend. That's what people think. But like, if you're coming up near an election and like the American Teachers Union wants to start running, you know, tens of thousands of dollars of ads in some state, and then people want to donate to the Teachers Union, and then people are like, hold on, they're not allowed to campaign for a particular candidate or endorse somebody with commercials. That counts as like a campaign contribution. Everybody would lose their fucking mind. So I do think it would affect both sides. It's just people tend to see it more on the conservative side because it's more visible. But I think everybody would generally wants to be able to throw money at the issues that they think are important, as long as it's not directly supporting a candidate, blah, blah. It's a complicated issue, I think. Holy... Wait.
Collection and processing is a huge part of modern political campaigns. It's also really expensive and a lot harder to hand over without crossing the line of direct collaboration. But even here, there are plenty of groups that, bend these rules. When J.D. Vance was first running for senator in my home state of Ohio, he was heavily supported by one of Peter Thiel's super PACs named Protect Ohio Values. It turns out Thiel has a thing for spending lots of money to collect data on potential voters. Anyway, the only problem was he couldn't just hand that data over to Vance's campaign without it breaking the arm's distance rule of super PACs. So instead, they just uploaded the data to an obscure blog for his campaign team to stumble upon with the hope that nobody else would find it tucked away in an obscure corner of the internet.
Like, everybody knows what you're doing here. This is stupid. But, like, this is a thing that people do. Remember this? We saw this a long time ago. Was this in 2016? Wait. Fuck. Whatever. I'm not gonna be able to find it. Wait. Oh, was this? Oh, it might be this whole channel. Ted Cruz, 197 subs. So this is just like a random YouTube channel. Ted Cruz's campaign just dumped like 15 hours of random footage. I think some of it might not even have audio. Yeah, they're just like, oh, we just dumped this random footage on this YouTube channel. And okay, yeah, they understood this here. According to the CNN Post, many candidates quietly post raw videos on public websites as a way to share material illegally. Or, I'm sorry, as a way to share material legally with super PACs. Because if it's posted here and the super PAC runs into it, then, oh, nice, it's ungraded, not even color graded either. Then the super PACs can take it from here and then use it, and they're not directly collaborating. And it's kind of like everybody knows what you're doing here, you know? Hey, quick question. Do you get more out of people watching your YouTube videos that you edit or watching you live stream? If I have an hour to spend on either, which is best? Whatever you prefer to engage with, my friend. But probably watching me on Kick. But you should just do what makes you happy, okay?
This was, of course, challenged for being a pretty blatant.
What you should do, actually, is think about a thing where you think you have an edge. Go to polymarket.gg/DestinyGG for your promo. I'm just kidding. I don't have a promo code.
Flouting.
If I get one, though, I'm going to spam it every fucking day to you motherfuckers.
Of the rules. But the case was ultimately dismissed. Now, of course, hopefully it should go without saying that this happens just as much on both sides of the aisle. Democratic-aligned super PACs spent comparable amounts in 2024. Future Forward, a pro-Harris super PAC, raised over $700 million, and their coordination was probably a little bit too close for the spirit of these rules as well. In total, outside spending by super PACs and other independent groups exceeded $4.5 billion in the 2024 cycle, more than double what it was in 2016.
Is Facebook and Instagram monetization decent money? I'm not really monetized on Instagram yet. The Facebook one is decent, and the Spotify one is decent, so we're doing okay. And then I'm still waiting on YouTube. It takes them like 2 months to go over the fucking monetization request, so...
Collectively, super PACs alongside direct campaign finance is likely
What about TikTok? I don't have TikTok.
to exceed $10 billion at the federal level this year. It's not great, but at least we know it's actually happening. Because, well, the money we can actually see is far from the biggest problem. So it's time to learn how money works to find out just how deep this goes, why even the most aggressive campaign finance reform probably can't fix it, and why nobody really seems to want to try. If you have watched this channel for any amount of time, you already know that most companies do not actually care about your privacy.
Wait, what's the point of that
They
chest?
sell your data, they lose your data, and they treat it
Well,
like
how
a
can
line
I protect
item
my
on a balance
data?
sheet.
What do I
Which
do
is
about
why
it?
this video is sponsored by Cape.
What?
We have worked with Cape before, and they have shipped a few new features worth catching you up on. Cape is a privacy-focused mobile carrier that gives you unlimited talk, text, and data, plus a stack of security features no other carrier includes.
Feel free to ban, but do you feel anything that Mr. Mutin turned down a massive gambling sponsor due to being immoral when it would hugely improve his life, and yet you've accepted one? So here's what I'll say, but this is actually what I was referring to with the Washington earlier, okay? When I've always said in the past, I don't like gambling, okay? I don't like games against the house when it comes to like blackjack or pie gow or whatever the fuck craps or whatever. So I don't think I would ever take a gambling sponsorship insofar as that goes. That's what I've always said, okay? Now people are going to extend this to prediction markets or whatever. Personally, I don't know. The average person should be spending a fuck ton of money on prediction markets. And there's definitely, like, in a way, they are gambling for sure. But also, like, poker is gambling, and I really like poker, and I have taken poker sponsorships before. And I will take poker sponsorships if I get it. Well, I don't know if I would now. But the extending it to every possible fucking thing, like, we've clicked on prediction markets before. I don't have, like, a massive moral opposition to fucking prediction markets. I've never in my life said I have. The gambling thing has always just been the house games against the casino thing, the push the button and the slot machine go burr or whatever, and then make money or lose money. That's how I've always felt about that. But, you know, listen, hey, whatever makes you feel better.
They recently rolled out an IMSI rotation, which swaps the static subscriber ID your phone broadcasts every 24 hours so carriers and advertisers cannot track you in real time. They have also launched secondary numbers, 2 extra real phone lines built into your plan so you can hand them out for banking or shopping and keep your main line private. And finally, disappearing call logs, which auto-deletes your call and text metadata after 24 hours so there is nothing to leak or sell. Use code HowManyWorks33
Wait, how would that even work?
private. And finally, disappearing call logs, which auto-deletes your call and text metadata after 24 hours so there is nothing to leak or sell. Use code HowManyWorks33 for 33% off your first 6 months of Cape. Cape is available on Apple.
How are you even able to do that? Wait, what?
Google Play, and the Crescent Store. Link in my description. Okay, so campaign donations and super PACs are really just scratching the surface of these issues. The problem is that when you look deeper, it gets much worse. The first level down is what is, not at all sinisterly, known as dark money. Dark money is politically motivated spending that gets redirected through various organizations to push an agenda without any clear disclosure and without any clear source. These are typically structured as 501c4 nonprofits, which under IRS rules are allowed to engage in political activity so long as it is not their primary purpose. This means they can spend up to 49% of their budget on politics and never have to disclose a single donor. The Brennan Center estimates that over $1 billion in dark money was spent in federal elections between 2010 and 2024. And those are just the expenditures that could be tracked. And well, by definition, the thing that makes dark money dark is that most of it can't be. A major example that we have covered just recently is Build America AI, which is a dark money organization pushing the idea that America needs to beat China in AI, which very clearly feeds into the business interests of hyperscalers and AI labs that need red tape cut, land allotted for their data centers, and maybe some bailout money in case investor hype dies down.
Okay, this is what I hate about the AI talks right now, okay? Even though I don't know anything about AI, okay? But this is what it feels like when I watch people talk about it. You have people on the left who... I can't tell when I listen to like AOC or Bernie or whatever if these people just want to shut down basically all AI research in the US, or they want to like inhibit it to the point to where it's impossible for us to compete with the rest of the world on it. When I say the rest of the world, I basically mean China, right? Because that's our real adversary, which is like not good, right? We should be industry leaders when it comes to AI related stuff. I would say that should be, every American should feel that way. But then on the other side, for the people that are pushing the AI, it feels like it's literally them saying, you know, like, it would just be better if America built Skynet first, okay? So that if the world is going to get exploded, hopefully everybody else gets blown up before we do. I don't know. It feels like the other people on the other side of it are literally fucking evil.
Down. Now, obviously, this is not great. But at least in this case, their completely transparent motives make them pretty transparent. But the whole point of a dark money group is that you cannot trace the money back to the people who benefit from the policy changes. And this has a few other advantages too. Under federal law, foreign nationals are banned from donating to American political campaigns or PACs. But because 501c4 nonprofits don't have to disclose their donors, there is effectively no mechanism to enforce this for dark money groups. A foreign government or foreign corporation can donate to a 501c4, which then spends that money on American ads with a...
If it's not too much trouble, can you explain your rationale for limiting financing of campaigns? Okay, so yes, very easily, but then you follow it up with, if possible, can you delineate it from other comparable ways of influencing elections? That's much harder. It's a very good question that nobody ever really wants to deal with. So there's always going to be some form of unbalanced influence in society, and people are always very keen to talk about the financial influence. However, when it comes to social influence, there is no real way to limit that. So one way you kind of see this inverted in kind of a funny way. So in today's society, it's basically like, oh, like whoever has the money is in control of everything, and that's kind of bullshit, which I think people over-exaggerate it. But I mean, I'm sympathetic to the idea that somebody's voice means more than mine just because they have, 100 times my money. I don't know if that's fair, right? I can understand why that wouldn't feel fair to people. But if you go to like the Game of Thrones universe, and maybe this even was how it was, in the past, I'm not 100% sure, but maybe, where you have all of these great families and you've got like kings and queens, and these are the people that have the influence. There are people in society that are looked down upon because they don't have like family names, but they have influence through a lot of money, right? So like Littlefinger was one of these people, or the Bank of Bravos, or where was the fucking Iron Bank or whatever at? And these are people who in an ordinary, I guess, Game of Thrones world would never have influence ever because they just don't come from great houses, right? So their voice means nothing. But because they were able to earn money through some way, they are able to have some influence now. So it's like, in that way, I don't know, maybe having some financial levers to being able to wield more influence is like a balancing thing. The reality is, in some ways, like, society's never going to be perfect. Like, we're not going to be an anarcho thing where there's literally no unjust hierarchies anywhere and every single person has an equal voice for everything. So it's just trying to like balance things out as much as you can. Like, it's probably not okay if one person has the ability to, spend enough to fund an entire election. But then on the other hand, if you say no money at all and it's just the most popular people that everybody knows, it's also probably not okay. So what are you going to do?
Political agenda, and nobody would ever know. The FEC has acknowledged this loophole exists, yet they have not closed it. And then there are the corporate interests that just throw away the middleman altogether. There is really nothing money on American ads with a political agenda, and nobody would ever know. The FEC has acknowledged this loophole exists, yet they have not closed it. And then there are the corporate interests.
I really don't like this term called loophole because, Jesus Christ. Because loophole implies a thing that if you see it, it would be like very easy to close because it's a loophole. You close loopholes, that's all you do. But usually loopholes are like the intentional set of policies that are there for a particular reason. And so if you wanted to get rid of it, you would have to actually undo that particular policy. But that's like a harder conversation to have, and that kind of triggers me sometimes because it's like, whatever. Explain why, like, I'm a retard. Well, like, people will say, like, oh, like, it's a loophole that you can donate a bunch of money to charity and then get it written off on your taxes. Like, oh, that's a big loophole. And it's like, well, that's not a loophole. That's, like, how the tax code is written because we want it so that people can donate money to charity. We want to encourage that behavior. That's not a loophole. That's just what it is. So if you want to get rid of that thing, then you would just have to get rid of charitable donations, right? That's just, like, one example. Are you unsympathetic to the idea of changing perspective and saying maybe our influence on elections shouldn't be equal? Maybe your voice should have more weight in elections than mine. I mean, like, you can make that argument, but that, unfortunately, now I am going to do the American thing of like, well, who decides which voices should have more weight? I don't know if I've heard of a good system of figuring that out.
That just throw away the middleman altogether. There is really nothing stopping a major company from just running its own ads pushing a very specific political message. This is happening a lot at the moment with companies claiming that their AI data centers are going to be great for local economies, running ads in swing districts about job creation and infrastructure investment that look a lot like political endorsements but technically aren't.
So when work started to slow down, we searched for new opportunities.
Did you find what you find?
Which opened a data center in our
Meta!
town.
Oh my
So
god,
long
they
as
saved
they
the
avoid
town!
FEC trigger words like vote for or vote against and don't mention specific legislation, it's really hard to regulate this as political spending over a company just expressing its own interests as protected speech. But it gets worse. Everything we just covered, all of that is really just the price of admission. The thing that actually moves the needle once the politicians are in Washington is lobbying. And lobbying is a very different animal from campaign spending. Lobbyists are, in theory, just concerned citizens with very specific interests about very specific policies. In reality, they are primarily highly paid field experts from elite law firms funded by industry groups to support a very specific agenda.
Usually when I hear this convo, it's the lefties trying to kneecap the Dems when it comes to raising money, dark money APAC, while Republicans scoop that shit up without a worry. True. If you ever want to trigger the fuck out of everybody, okay? If you want a boiling hot take, do you want to know why Mamdani has had such a good run so far as mayor of New York City? I think there is a very simple answer to that, but I think it's a very unsatisfying one. Like, all of the statements about Mamdani has like done such a great job governing New York City and blah, blah, blah. This is not really true. I mean, like, I'm not saying he's done a bad job, but like he's been mayor for a few months or whatever, several months or whatever. Well, no, actually, no, wait, that's not fair. Hold on, wait. My brain might be. Is it 6 months or a year and 6 months or 7 months or a year and 7 months? Hold on, just making sure I'm not mind fucking myself. Okay, yeah, 6 months. Okay, sorry. Just making sure I'm not mind fucking myself. And this wasn't like a year. It's not like he's been mayor for long enough to have made like any significant impact on anything, or just that, right? To say that like, oh, he's had a successful mayorship or whatever, you know, he's done so well. Like, his advertising has been pretty good, and he's really good at talking about things. And I think that his communication is top notch. But the real reason I think why he is so successful is because, or why he appears to be so successful, is because the far left doesn't attack him because they kind of need him as like their proof of concept. So he's like their main ally. And conservatives don't attack him that much now that the election is over because it's New York City. They're never going to win an election there. So Mamdani actually gets to define himself based on his communication to the public. And he doesn't constantly have two other massive factions in US media trying to define him as something that he doesn't want to be defined as. So like the far left is not saying Mamdani's this evil person who's a fucking sellout, cuck, whatever. And the right is like, we're never gonna fucking be mayors in New York City. Who the fuck cares, you know? They fought about it during the election or whatever, and Trump tried to make a broader point about it. But once the election's over, they're like largely disinterested. And so that gets this lets Mamdani make an ad about filling in potholes, and that's it. And people look at it and like, oh, that's cool. Whereas if Mamdani was like a lib left filling in potholes, your Hassans, your Emma Vigilans, your Matt Bernsteins, all these people are like, wow, people in New York City are starving to death. They're homeless. They can't afford their homes. They're crazy. They don't have health care. And all you're doing is out here smiling and filling in potholes. Seriously? How about instead of potholes, we get a working subway system so the roads aren't constantly being destroyed by people that have to drive cars to work? Have you ever thought about that, Mamdani? How about instead of smiling around and going to, what was it, baseball? Baseball games. Is that what it was? Whatever, baseball, NBA? I don't know where you saw Speed last. Instead of going to sports games, why don't you fucking do something about the people on the streets who need you, Mamdani? Right, you never hear that from the far left. And then conservatives, again, it's New York City. Then what the fuck are they going to say about it? They're not ever going to be in power there, so. Not to take away anything from Mamdani, because I do think he's done really well in communicating, but yeah.
Now, to play devil's advocate a little bit here, a lot of lawmakers are not experts in the things they are creating laws on. So being able to consult with a diverse pool of industry specialists could theoretically avoid designing laws that are just dumb for their specific application. Laws on technology probably shouldn't be exclusively written by an 80-year-old senator who doesn't know the difference between a coding language and their high school transcripts. And that kind of makes sense. But the problem is that almost all of the work of actually drafting legislation
There's
gets
one more
passed
step.
off to these lobbyists
No.
who get to word things exactly how they
No,
want.
there should be
and
one more
ensure
step.
It won't get held up in courts because they are the legal experts. Congressional staffers have openly described how lobbyists will...
This is on the politician to have a competent group of staffers that are capable of interfacing with these lobbyists and making sure that whatever the lobbyists are suggesting to you is in line with the vision of your candidate that you are a staffer for. That should be the relationship that's going on here, unless you just suck at having good staffers.
Hand them fully written legislative text ready to be introduced. And because the staffers are overworked and under-resourced, they will sometimes file it with barely any changes. So really...
Oh, hire more staffers, losers. Hey, just watched the reaction vid on the Penguins, and at some point I realized the Sun showed a clip of you on stream. Wasn't that forbidden by Twitch rules to show banned streamers? A long time ago, it used to be forbidden because people who were friends of mine or fans of mine or whatever would watch stuff on stream, and they would get banned for it. But then eventually Hassan wanted to start reacting to me more, and then they allowed it so that he could do that. I wish I was joking, but I'm really not joking.
In a lot of cases, the lobbying firms are the lawmakers. The lawmakers themselves are just the rubber stamp. Now, there is the widely held assumption that this corporate-funded lobbying is working exclusively to cut red tape and remove regulations. In reality, it is often exactly the opposite. They want to introduce regulation in exactly the right areas to block potential new challengers from entering their market. The pharmaceutical industry is particularly good at this. They spent over $370 million on lobbying in 2024 alone, more than any other industry that year. And a huge chunk of that went towards ensuring that drug pricing regulations are written in a way that protects their existing patent portfolios while making it harder for generic competitors to enter the market. The old team at Micro did a great video on this, explaining how internet providers lobbied against municipalities looking to roll out their own broadband and actually deliver a competitive service. In both cases, getting the right kind of laws passed was a lot more profitable than having no regulations at all. There are now over 14,000 registered lobbyists in Washington alone, which works out to roughly 26 lobbyists for every single elected official in Congress. Dang. And if you include the people doing lobbying adjacent work who don't formally register, some estimates put the real number closer to 100,000. And all of this is just the federal level. State legislatures are arguably worse because they get a fraction of the media scrutiny. State-level lobbying disclosure requirements are weaker, staffs are smaller, and individual lobbyists can have an outsized influence on a state representative who might only have 1 or 2 aides and no research budget to independently verify what the lobbyist is telling them. Of course, these people also coordinate the efforts of everything we've already talked about. They can suggest that a given company or industry group would really like this type of legislation, and that conveniently, they are looking to spend a lot of money advertising this issue. A study looking at 93 multinational corporations that lobbied for a single tax provision, the American Jobs Creation Act of 2004, found that those firms spent a combined $283 million on lobbying and received $62.5 billion in tax savings, working out to a return of $220 for every single dollar spent. Those returns have to come from somewhere, and that somewhere is the $5 billion in tax savings.
This paper we use audited corporate tax disclosures relating to a tax holiday on repatriated earnings created by the American Jobs Creation Act of 2004 to examine the return on lobbying. We find firms lobbying for this provision have a return in excess of 200. Repatriating firms are more profitable overall, but certainly profitability is not a predictor of repatriation amount. Rather, industry and firm size are more cash on hand. Approximately ability to repatriate is not associated with fuck. What does repatriate mean in this context? I would have to look up what what this American Jobs Creation Act actually did.
Working out to a return of $220 for every single dollar spent. Those returns have to come from somewhere, and that somewhere is the tax base, the consumer, or the competitor who got regulated out of the market. Now, there is one other reason why lobbying has become such an effective tool against lawmakers. And this other reason also explains one of the other logical questions you may have had so far, which is, why do lawmakers let this happen? Yes, they want their re-election funding, but there are alternative systems to get it. And by just taking a step back, if nobody else had lobbyists to answer to or super PAC money funding their campaigns, it means they wouldn't need it either. They could change these laws because, well, that's literally their job. And so far, it looks like the only reason they don't want to is because the other guy won't do it first. Beyond the weird prisoner's dilemma they have backed themselves into here, it must be recognized that for these lawmakers constantly begging for campaign funding...
I wish... That's another thing that I hate about these fucking video type things. It's like, can we not bring up like the both sides of anything? Like, lobbying is probably a somewhat important thing because not every person in Congress is going to know about every issue related to their constituency. Like, it is okay to have people who can go to a congressman and say like, hey, like Louis, is it Louis or Louis? Louis Rossman. Louis Rossman? Is it Louis? It's Louis Rossman. I would argue he's a kind of a lobbyist, right? He's going to congressman. He is arguing that there is legislation that should be put in place to make it so that companies can't fuck you over with like whatever DRM or whatever related technologies. Like, that kind of thing I think is important. It's not bad. Like, it's okay for that to happen. You know, maybe lobbying is too much, or maybe it goes too far in some areas or whatever. But like, the idea that, well, the reason why we don't want to get rid of lobbying is because congressmen don't want to lose their source of money and the other guy might, you know, keep the lobbying and blah, blah, blah. It's like, well, I mean, there are pros and cons to this, right?
Themselves into here, it must be recognized that for these lawmakers constantly begging for campaign funding and playing nice with an army of lobbyists telling them how to do their job has got to be pretty demeaning. So, even if they don't do it for the good of their constituents, surely they would be motivated to reform these laws just to make their own job less humiliating, right? Well, there is one good reason why they don't.
Oh, wait, never mind.
And that is the revolving door.
Oh, never mind.
Elected officials at the federal level are paid well by the standards of average Americans, but not by the standards of the people they interact with on a daily basis. A member of Congress earns $174,000 a year. The median partner at a top lobbying firm in DC earns well over $1 million. A huge unspoken way that money gets into politics is the promise of a cushy job for when they retire or get voted out. This extends well beyond elected officials as well. In our video on corporate consolidation, we found that almost all of the previous FTC chairpersons over the last 2 decades, with the exception of Lina Khan, went on to get high-profile roles at M&A law firms, specifically working on the kinds of deals that the FTC should probably be blocking. So yeah, the person whose job it is to block anti-competitive mergers knows that in 2 years, they will probably be working for the firms doing those mergers. That creates an incentive that no amount of campaign finance reform can fix. Now, the number one most common career move for elected officials after leaving politics is to become a political lobbyist. In 2025 alone, 866 members of Congress and congressional staffers made the move from Capitol Hill to K Street, a 60% increase over the year before and a new record.
Wow, really?
In total, roughly half of all former lawmakers end up working as political lobbyists. Jack Abramoff, one of the few lobbyists who has actually been convicted for pushing these flexible laws too far, put it pretty bluntly when he admitted that he would tell a congressional staffer, "When you're done working on the Hill, we'd very much like you to consider coming to work for us." And that was most of his job done. Every request from our office, every request of our clients, everything that we want, they're gonna do. And not only that, they're gonna think of things we can't think of to do it. Former representatives and staffers are the perfect candidates to become lobbyists because they know their way around the Capitol, but also because they are a walking billboard showing every current staffer that playing along with the lobbyist is the path to a 7-figure salary as a lobbyist. Now, to be fair, there are cooling off periods in place. Former members of Congress are technically barred from lobbying for 1 to 2 years after leaving office. But these rules are trivially easy to get around. You can do strategic consulting or government relations advisory work, which is, and I cannot stress this enough, exactly the same thing without technically registering as a lobbyist until this period is up. And well, even if you did somehow fully enforce the cooling off period and close every loophole, it still wouldn't fix the core problem. Because the incentive is baked into the system the moment a staffer realizes that the people they are writing laws for are also the people who are going to sign their next paycheck. But the revolving door at least involves people who used to work in government. The next channel of influence doesn't even require that. Obviously, certain owners of major news outlets have certain political leanings, and they can put weight on candidates to support their incentives or face unfavorable coverage. Now, this one is really hard to quantify, because media influence doesn't show up in any spending report. There is no FEC filing for choose not to cover the story or ran 17 segments on this topic instead of that one. And no, this is not a segue to a ground news ad. But the effects are very real.
What?
The media landscape has become so partisan that this is arguably even more important in primaries than in general elections. Because the threat of poor coverage from a politically aligned outlet can end a primary campaign before it starts. If you are running as a Republican and can't get onto Fox News, you're kind of cooked. Hypothetically, of course. Social media platforms are now owned by people with very specific political and business interests, and the editorial decisions about what gets amplified, what gets suppressed, and what gets labeled as misinformation are being made by the same people who are pushing for specific policy outcomes. Even companies that are not traditional media can also influence this by suggesting they would feel more comfortable advertising on networks that did or did not push a certain political agenda. I can say from personal experience that even down here at Little O Works Media Group, we have lost sponsors because we pointed out things like the lunacy surrounding current AI spending and the push for bailouts. This is becoming a very real pressure even at this level. And for better or worse, influencers and independent creators are becoming a political force.
Why not call that out? Or say, why not say something about that? I don't know. I feel like the money is so huge today and all of these I shouldn't say backdoors, I guess, and all the sponsorships. I don't know if people care that much if you have a negative feeling about any of it. Like you said, like I think they just want their company names out there because they're so pervasive at this point. It doesn't really matter if you say bad things about them or not.
And then there's the one that nobody really needs to talk about for very long because it is exactly what it sounds like.
Bribery?
Straight up bribes.
Whoa!
Now, this kind of direct corruption isn't as necessary as it used to be because of all of the other legal channels we just went through. But it does still happen, and enforcement is, to put it generously, relaxed. Senator Bob Menendez was convicted on 16 federal charges in 2024 for accepting gold bars, cash, and a Mercedes-Benz in exchange for official acts. And his colleagues in the Senate only moved to expel him after the conviction, at which point he resigned before a vote could take place. And Menendez isn't alone. In 2024, Business Insider found that over 100 members of Congress or their spouses made stock trades in industries directly affected by their committee work. A senator sitting on the Armed Services Committee buying defense stocks before a major procurement announcement is, well, exactly what it looks like. And the Stock Act that was supposed to prevent this is enforced with fines of $200. $200 on a trade that could net hundreds of thousands is not a deterrent. The uncomfortable truth is that when you line up all 7 of these channels together, the direct contributions, the super PACs, the dark money, the corporate ads, the lobbyists, the revolving door, the media influence, and yeah, the bribes, what you are looking at is a system where the legal options are so effective that the illegal ones are almost redundant. Now, some people have accused me of being a bit of a gloomy goose, so I want to talk about some actual, genuine, real good news here. At a state level, there has been some progress to circumvent the super PAC funding enabled by the Citizens United ruling in several states. And at least in state legislatures, it has received unanimous support from both sides of the aisle. This won't fix all of these problems, and the legal techniques they are using won't work at the federal level without a new Supreme Court ruling. But this is still a step in the right direction. Like always, the big Glizzard beat me to covering this particular topic, so I will leave a link to his video in the description alongside some other articles. Unfortunately, the federal level is going to need a little bit more work. The obvious fix is to close the revolving door, remove the financial incentive for lawmakers to play along, and maybe, hot take alert, actually pay elected officials enough that a lobbying salary isn't a six-fold raise. Yes, that would cost more money in government salaries, but it would be a drop in the bucket compared to how much money is lost through poor policy. Those 93 companies that spent $283 million on lobbying and got $62.5 billion back did not create that money out of thin air. That money came from somewhere, and that somewhere is the tax base, workers' paychecks, and consumers' wallets. There have been efforts. The For the People Act passed in the House in 2019 and again in 2021 with provisions to require dark money disclosures and tighten revolving door restrictions. It died in the Senate both times. The Disclose Act, which would have required 501c4 groups to name donors who give them over $10,000, has been introduced in every Congress since 2010. It has never passed. But the only people who could pass these reforms are the exact same people who benefit from the current system. You are essentially asking politicians to vote themselves a stricter set of rules and a permanent ban on the career they were planning to retire into. Now, if you want to see all of these systems actually put together, go and watch this next video to find out why we are already subsidizing AI data centers. And don't forget to like and subscribe to keep on learning how money works.